Lakeland Currents, your public affairs program for North Central Minnesota. Production funding for Lakeland Currents is made possible by Bemidji Regional Airport, serving the region with daily flights to Minneapolis-St. Paul International Airport. More information available at bemidjiairport.org. Closed captioning for Lakeland Currents is sponsored by Nisswa Tax Service, tax preparation for businesses and individuals. Online at nisswatax.com.
Hello again, my name is Jason Edens, and I'm the host of Lakeland Currents here in our Brainerd studio. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for your support of Lakeland Public TV. Friends, if you came up in northern Minnesota like I did, then you're probably very familiar with the loon's call. The common loon is, of course, a fixture here in northern Minnesota, and its beautiful and unmistakable calls punctuate our summer days and evenings. Despite the fact that it is our state bird, some of us are probably guilty of taking it a bit for granted. However, here with me today is Chris Christophic, the chairman of the Scientific Council at the National Loon Center, a champion for the common loon, and someone who can tell us a great deal about the public-private partnership, the National Loon Center, dedicated to both preserving the loon habitat and, of course, the loon itself. Chris, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Jason.
I really appreciate you being here.
You're welcome.
So first and foremost, can you tell us just a little bit about how the National Loon Center came to be? What's the origin story of this exciting project?
Sure, it's a really exciting story about its origin. It started about 3 years ago with the community of Cross Lake involved, and the Minnesota design team came to town to figure out what Cross Lake should be when it grows up. And there were all manner of things that bubbled up in that discussion, and one of them was, well, since the loon is the iconic state bird of Minnesota, why don't we build a loon center? And it bubbled from there into where we're at today, very, very close to breaking ground on a 15,000 square foot National Loon Center that will be a educational resource center for all things loons.
So when visiting your website, nationalloonscenter.org, it's clear that you already have a really good idea of what the center will look like. How much will this cost? It seems like a very ambitious project.
It is an ambitious project, and it's expensive. We're already a little bit over $13 million in estimated costs to build the center. So we're in that fundraising area now to complete that. We have received a tremendous support from the public as well as state and the federal government. The Minnesota Legislative Commission on Minnesota Resources has given us $4 million to help build the center. But there's a bit of a hook in that $4 million in that we need to raise another $6 million in order to get to total $4 million. So that's the project that we're all working on hard right now. And there's a group that's very active, that's working hard. Everyone that they have contacted is very interested in the project. Although we haven't had anybody say no yet, we really haven't had someone step up to the plate with a big check. So if one of our listeners are listening today that would like to name the building, we should talk. There's an opportunity.
So it's the National Loon Center, but the center itself has yet to be named. Is that
That's
what
correct.
I'm hearing?
That's correct. Most of these iconic buildings that are built to support the environment or wildlife, they all have someone's name on them. So we're looking for somebody that would like to have a legacy with their name on the building, and it would be called their name, National Loon Center.
I see. So it's about $14 million total. You already have some sort of a commitment from LCCMR for about $4 million. Is that the only portion that will be publicly funded, or are you expecting more public dollars to come in specifically for the project?
There's a bit more public dollars. There's about a $2.5 million in-kind donation from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers where the center will be built. Otherwise, we'd have to go out and buy that land in order to construct the center. But the Army Corps of Engineers has signed a lease, a long-term lease, and it has an appraised value of $2.5 million. There have been other donations by local people who have given us money, something in the neighborhood of $2 million or something like that. So we're well on the road, or well on the way to accomplishing the end goal of that $13 plus million to get the center going.
So the gap is $6 million at this point in time.
About $6 million.
And
that's a real important number right now, is to get $6 million, and then the rest of it will come. There's no doubt of that.
And $2 million came locally.
Yeah.
That's remarkable.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
and we've already expended something in the neighborhood of $1.5 million, $1.75 million just in the planning phase, the design phase, to get the Loon Center to where it's at today.
Proper planning prevents poor performance, so that's an important part of the project, without a doubt.
Without a doubt. That's my buddy Lou Holtz's statement too.
I noticed on your website that you have sponsorship from some very high-profile entities, including, if I'm not mistaken, the Minnesota United.
That's correct.
How did that come about? That's appropriate, and yet
Minnesota United is the Loons,
right?
And it's just a similarity of ideas, and the Loons and the National Loon Center, they go together. In fact, Sunday, this day after Saturday, that's Sunday, I think, they are announcing their new uniforms, and we're going to be present at the Alliance Stadium in St. Paul for that event as well. But yeah, the Loons are a great sponsor, great partner with us.
So you said earlier that you think you'll be breaking ground soon, but there's a $6 million gap yet. So when can someone actually go to Cross Lake to visit the National Loon Center? When's the ribbon cutting?
If the stars and planets remain aligned, we will have a ribbon cutting scheduled for May 1st this year.
This year?
That's about time the loons come back to Minnesota from their migrating grounds. And we will start the outdoor portion of the Loon Center, which is an approximate 1,000-foot boardwalk, some mooring stations, and a massive, big-time shoreline restoration project on the Army Corps of Engineer shoreline to bring it back to its original habitat that had loons and had all manner of wildlife living in it. That over time has been destroyed, unintentionally, but it's been destroyed. We're going to bring that back to its natural positioning.
So one of the benefits of this project is not only the center itself and the education, of course, and the tourist draw, but it's also the fact that you are going to restore a very specific part of the shoreland.
Yes.
Oh, that's exciting.
Yeah, it really is.
And so I'm just learning now that even though the center won't be built this spring, you're going to go ahead and have some sort of a celebration to commemorate the fact that it will be built, and there will be some things that folks can visit and actually take part in. Is that right?
It will be a construction season project this summer. There could be a floating classroom that might be available midsummer that will take people out on the lake to do some water research, to do some exploration as to what loon habitat is, what shoreline restoration should look like, and those kinds of things. That's a potential. But the actual construction of the building probably is not going to start until 2021, maybe 2022. Hopefully we get it going in 21.
Okay. So about 18 months from now, we may actually start to see the building.
Start to see bricks and mortar starting to appear. Yeah.
That's exciting. So I see that you've brought a friend with, and I want to talk about the bird itself, of course, but very briefly, I noticed on your website that it's the National Loon Center and the National Freshwater Institute. Is that right? Are those two co-located entities? What's their role?
The National Freshwater Institute is a trademark name to help educate people on freshwater. We have a little slogan that the call of the loon is a call for change. And the reason for that is that the loons, like us as humans, we need fresh water to survive. And we as a population over time have done some things to water, to contaminate it, to degrade it, that has harmed wildlife.
Such as?
The National Audubon Society, for example, has said that by the turn of the century, we may lose all of the loons in Minnesota because of water quality. So the National Freshwater Institute will be a research facility within the Loon Center to allow the public to understand how we can protect that water resource and clean it up, in fact, and not contaminate it.
I have to ask you more about that, because that's almost unfathomable for a Minnesota to hear that it's possible that the loon could be extirpated from our state by the end of the century. What would cause that?
It's just it's the loss of habitat. It's the degrading of water by contaminants, all manner of contaminants, phosphorus from fertilizer, destroying habitat, lead poisoning, all manner of things, and mercury poisoning has had a degradation of water all over the country, and it's affecting us here as well. Acid rain, it all affects water. And without clean water, organisms are not going to survive, including you and me.
So the loon isn't listed as a threatened species, but yet it may no longer be in Minnesota if we don't take good care of our freshwaters.
That's exactly right. That's true. It is not on the endangered species. The loon population in Minnesota is stable. It's not growing. It's not declining. It's stable. But there are these warning signals are out there, and we need to be very cautious about what we do with water. No question.
If you could change one habit of lakefront property owners and their shoreland management, what would it be? What would you like to see lakefront property owners do differently in order to preserve the fresh water that the loon depends upon?
There needs to be a buffer between the lake shore and beautiful green grass. Let the wild waterfront remain wild. It's the home for all manner of wildlife. And some of us have a need or a propensity to destroy that and make literally a golf green lawn all the way to the water's edge. And we fertilize it and we maintain it and we look at it and it is beautiful, but it's not the natural habitat that wildlife uses. So if we could leave a buffer, that would really be great.
And do you see more and more lakefront property owners doing so?
I think so. Yeah, there's certainly a movement to create that. There's a lot of restoration projects going on now in the Brainerd Lakes area as an effort of the University of Minnesota and the Department of Natural Resources. All of those are working together to help property owners restore that waterfront.
So the center will obviously be situated right in the heart of one of our beautiful lake districts. Will the center have information about that specifically, about what a homeowner can do to ensure the viability of the loon habitat?
Of course. That's part of the initiative of the Freshwater Institute and the Scientific Loon Council will both cooperate and educate people on best practices.
So you mentioned earlier the Minnesota Design Team and some other entities that kind of help the community arrive at the National Loon Center. Are there a lot of local champions that are behind this, or would you describe this more as a statewide initiative? Who's really in the driver's seat?
I guess I'm not understanding your question too.
I'm curious where the catalyst is coming from. Who's driving this initiative? Is it mostly folks from the Brainerd Lakes area, from Cross Lake, or would you say that there are individuals from across the state that are helping to support this and advance the project as a whole? Does that make sense?
It does. The main thrust has come from Cross Lake, the Cross Lake area. And then it has spread now to the Brainerd Lakes area. In fact, the Brainerd Chamber of Commerce is going to be the operator of the Loon Center when it's complete. And as a result of that, it has also overflowed into the state and throughout the entire region. There's a lot of interest. There's a lot of people involved that are helping us move this project forward. It's a snowball that's going downhill, and it's gaining speed and size every day.
That's great. Well, I'm really excited to visit, but I'm also really excited to learn something new about the loon. I'm an amateur, but a very avid birder. So what can you tell us about the loon that maybe most people don't know?
The loon is a diving bird, of course, and it has solid bones. That allows that bird then to dive down into the bottom of the lake and search for food and be able to stay underwater for long periods of time. Another factor or another interesting tidbit about loons is they cannot walk on land. Their center of gravity is such that they bounce rather than walk. Their feet are clear at the back of their bodies, so they're unable to walk. They also have difficulty in taking off, in flying. Because of this center of gravity issue, it takes a tremendous amount of distance in order for them to become airborne. Their wings are smaller than other birds that fly. I guess all birds fly for that matter, but other birds that we're accustomed to, like ducks and geese, they literally can jump up out of the water and are airborne, where a loon might take 300-400 yards before it can get enough speed and enough wind underneath its wings to take off and fly. So they're very awkward, they're very clumsy. That's another little tidbit. A myth that maybe we can dispel about loons is that they do not necessarily mate for life. We have proven that through geo-tracking and tagging of loons, that if a nesting failure occurs for a variety of reasons, the female will find another mate and may re-nest in that same season or certainly next season. But they always come back to their natal lake. The adults will come back to that natal lake. There's something in their DNA that says, this is home, this is where I'm going to come back to in the springtime. Obviously, our loons leave in the fall, they migrate. We believe that our female loons from Minnesota migrate to the Gulf of Mexico, and the males migrate to the Atlantic coast off of Florida. The juvenile loons, the young of the year, the young chicks that are hatched after they fledge in the late summer, early fall, and achieve juvenile stage, they all migrate to the Gulf of Mexico, and they remain there for 4 years, 3 to 4 years, until they gain sexual maturity, and then they come back to their natal lake as well. So the birds that hatched last spring, that we saw all summer long, the babies that we saw all summer long and pay a lot of attention to, they were the last to leave last fall before the lakes froze over, and we will not see them again for 3 or 4 years. But they will come back.
And those siblings will come back to the same lake.
They'll come back to the same lake.
At which point they will then potentially find their own
They'll find their own
nesting
mate,
habitat.
and they will nest. They'll find a nesting location and will nest from that. Yeah.
One of the things I've observed with loons is oftentimes just prior to the fall migration, you often see a bunch of them congregate in one area. What's that all about?
That's called rafting, and it is a conversation amongst loons, and they get together in rather large flocks, could be 100, 150, 200 loons at a time, will gather on large lakes, and they feed heavily on fatty fish, ciscos and those kinds of fish, and then they migrate pretty much together. The females will, the females will leave first, and they fly to Lake Michigan, north of Chicago. They may hang out in Lake Michigan for 2 or 3 weeks. The males will join them. They again feed on those fatty fish in Lake Michigan, and then they leave one at a time, migrate to the Gulf or to the Atlantic coast.
Interesting. So my understanding was that you couldn't actually have loons, but yet here with us you have a loon, a full loon, you have a loon head and a loon wing and other parts of the loon. Tell us how you were able to bring this and share it with us.
Well, it's illegal for you and I to have any part of a loon, including its feathers. The loons are protected by the Federal Migratory Bird Act. I believe it was enacted in 1909. So we're unable to be able to collect these artifacts. So this bird and these parts that are on the table are on loan from the Department of Natural Resources as an educational thing that we can show people who may not have the opportunity to get really close to a loon what they truly look like. And part of this is a touch and feel display where folks can actually touch a loon wing, can touch a loon head. And the loon head is very, very interesting. It has a long beak, and that's what they use to feed with. They stab their fish.
They impale the fish.
Impale the fish, and then soften it up with their beak that's very, very strong, and then swallow it, as do all birds, into their gizzard. So unlike a dabbling bird, like a goose, has a short beak, he feeds off of the bottom of the lake, comes up above and eats. So really difference in the two birds.
So I know that geese eat a lot of macroinvertebrates. Do loon also eat macroinvertebrates?
They do.
Okay,
They do. They eat the frogs and salamanders and crawdads and crustaceans, snails, But fish are primarily their main diet, fatty fish.
Why do loons need so much room in order to take off? I see you have two wings here.
Yeah.
Tell us about the difference in the physiology.
From a size standpoint, the loon feather or the loon wing in my left hand versus a goose wing in my right hand, the loon wing is quite a bit smaller, maybe 50-60% smaller than the goose wing. So as the goose comes up out of the water, it is able to gain flight rather quickly, where the loon wing has to really beat its wings hard and fast in order to gain enough airspeed to take off. So they're very, very, very different birds in the manner in which they fly.
So, Chris, how did you get involved?
Well, I'm a loon lover, like a lot of us. I have a loon cam that we have a live video camera and broadcast a nesting pair of loons onto the internet. It has sound and chat capability. And about a year ago, I was asked to help with the National Loon Center. And at first, I was a little bit reluctant. I didn't know that I wanted to take on another challenge in my life. But I have done so, and it's very interesting. It's very time-consuming, but it's also it's been a big educational thing for me as well. I've learned a lot more about loons in the last year or so than what I had known in the past, and it's really been a lot of fun. It's a good group of people.
You know, when you go out on the water in Cross Lake and on any one of the lakes in that community, there's a lot of traffic. To what extent does boat traffic and boaters to what extent does that contribute to loon mortality? Is that a risk or a concern, or are most boaters pretty respectful of the loon habitat?
Humans are the second biggest predator of loons. Eagles being the first, but boaters and people getting too close to the loons cause them to abandon nests. Speedboats, wakeboard boats, and jet skis and those kinds of things have been known to kill loons. So we are predators. There's no doubt about it that we cause some damage. So we need to give the loons the space that they deserve. We like to say stay away from them 150 to 200 feet. Enjoy them, of course, because they enjoy us. They become very friendly. They're curious. They'll swim up to your boat and they'll swim under your boat. You can talk to them and they'll talk back to you. But give them the space that they deserve, because it's really their environment that we're in that water situation.
Sure. So is it safe to assume that the National Loon Center will also have a lot for boater education and help people understand the do's and the don'ts with regard to loon proximity?
There's five issues that we're really going to promote, and one of them is boater safety. Another is aquatic invasive species. Get the lead out. Lead fishing tackle and ammunition is a toxin to loons. They ingest a split shot or a BB from a shotgun shell. That little tiny split shot of lead will kill a loon in about a week. So
one pellet. I'm sorry to interrupt, but one pellet.
One pellet will kill a loon. The shoreline restoration and habitat things are another issue, and then of course water quality.
So the common loon, of course, is our state bird, but the common loon is not the only loon, right? There are other loons.
There's 5 species of loons.
5 species. Do we ever see any of those other species here in Minnesota? I think I saw an Arctic loon in Silver Bay. Is that possible?
It's possible, but it would be exceedingly rare.
Okay.
It would be very rare. Occasionally we will see a yellow-billed loon.
Okay.
The Arctic loon spends most of its time, of course, in the far north, and then they migrate off of the Pacific coast. So it's highly unusual that they would be in the central part of the country. The red-breasted loon is another one that we don't see much of. The common loon, and what's the fifth one? It slipped my mind right at the moment.
Well, Chris, I want to thank you and your colleagues for your work to preserve the habitat for our state bird, the loon. It's been a pleasure visiting with you.
Yeah, well, thanks, Jason.
And I want to thank all of you for joining us once again at Lakeland Currents. Today we're going to close with a video directly from the National Loon Center where you can learn more about their efforts. So thank you again for joining us. What's currently on your mind? Send us your conversation ideas, and I look forward to seeing you next time.
The call of the loon is a call for change. Scientists say that loons might not exist in Minnesota 50 years from now if we don't start making some changes today. Did you know the quality of our lake water has steadily declined over the past 50 years? Loons need clean, fresh water to survive and thrive. We all do. The National Loon Center will help all of us become leaders for loon preservation and freshwater conservation.
The National Loon Center will be a place of discovery through hands-on learning. Interactive exhibits in and around the center will inspire visitors to help protect loons and our freshwater ecosystems. The University of Minnesota will help create research and educational experiences through citizen science, including a floating classroom. The center will house the Scientific Loon Council and the National Freshwater Institute. These initiatives will bring together the brightest minds from across the country to find solutions that tackle threats to loons and freshwater. Families, nature enthusiasts, and scientists will have access to more than 1,000 feet of protected shoreline on the beautiful Whitefish chain of lakes in Cross Lake, Minnesota. This popular recreation area is projected to see 200,000 visitors each year once the center is built. Plus, millions of people will be engaged online. The National Loon Center Foundation has received $4 million from the state of Minnesota, a $2 million federal in-kind lease, and $1 million from community contributions to help build the center. However, $6 million from corporate and foundation sponsors is still needed.
You can make a difference. You can help protect our loons, preserve our lakes, and inspire the next generation of conservationists.